a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's Hour of Empower LinkedIn Live. We've been really very successful with our word of the day, which today is wild, which yesterday was undeniable. So, we're really starting to leverage perception
That's right.
and testing interpretations and applications of words, and maybe that expands everybody's vocabulary as well as maybe their patience tolerance for how other people use words. So, with that said, chat's open. Like I say, we depend on you to support us in a direction that you want us to go and be as relevant and as far as takeaways. With that, I'm honored to have Rita back. Rita was here yesterday and is here almost, well, every Wednesday. Catherine's back for the second time. Welcome, Catherine. I'm honored to have both of these fine ladies who really, if you check out their profiles, you'll see how distinguished and valuable they can be as far as contributing to other people's success. So, with that, Rita, what are your initial thoughts of Wild?
Well, first, I want to thank you, Donald, for doing what you do. To be here every day is monumental. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our community of belonging and welcome Catherine today. So, I had a lot of fun thinking about wild compared to undeniable for yesterday, and that just haunted me. I can't stop saying it now. I'm undeniably excited to be back again today. But wild, we could go in the wild. We have the book where the wild things are. Sometimes I'm feeling wild. Sometimes my hair is looking wild. So when I looked for synonyms and actual definitions of wild, there was about a page. And so I'm just wondering, Catherine, what makes you feel wild, or do you have an example to share?
Well,
Pick it
it's
up.
so fun, yeah, and thank you to both of you. It's an honor to be here with you, Don, and with you, Rita. Like, how fun is this?
How
And
fun is this?
exactly, because I equate wild
Mhm.
with fun and adventure and expansion, and and it takes courage to do that, right? And
Oh.
to keep moving forward. And I've always been a jumper, right? If I see something and I can't wait to go towards it, right? And so it hasn't always worked out exactly the way I thought it would. Some of those things happen, but we're all a part of nature. And as you were talking, Rita, nature and wildness
Mhm.
is you know combined.
Being out in the wild is so beautiful, right? Don,
Well,
what do you think?
I think
Hi, Jeff.
wild has to do with style to a certain extent,
Okay.
right? So just like you said, hair can look wild, clothing can look wild, and what
Mhm.
is wild? It's not dangerous, someone's hair or dress,
Right?
but it moves away from the norm or the expected, right?
Mhm.
Even when a lion walks around gracefully, it doesn't seem wild until it opens
Mhm.
its mouth and starts roaring, right? And then you say that's a wild animal
Right.
because I think what wild says is powerful also.
I
Yeah.
was just going to say that word power. Absolutely.
Well, and that's the beauty of these words is it's the root that
Mhm.
what it is extends to and what it grows from. And then it's visualization because people could see a lion roaring, and if you talk in pictures as well as words, that's, you want to bring out your wildness. You know, you really do. You want to be wild, but you want to be accepted in that circumstance or environment. And that's why groups do so well.
Right.
Because if everyone's doing it, first of all, it's acceptable. And second of all, it gets encouraging, right? If everybody's jumping into the pool, after a while, it's like, well, what am I standing here? But you would never be the first to jump. And maybe wild has something to do with placement, right? Were you
Right.
the first to jump or the last? How wild was that?
Right.
I think that's the morning after the day, you look back at the party or the event, and you say that was just wild. So I want to welcome Jeff here today. Like I say, our comments really are the most valuable thing for everyone. Natalie, who's coming on this week again. Good morning, wonderful ladies. I'm wildly excited to listen to this conversation. And Natalie's just a wonderful artist, you know. So you, Natalie, Catherine?
What'd you say?
Do you know Natalie?
Oh, I do. Yes, we've had fabulous conversation, and it's just, yeah, I love her work, and there's a bit of wildness in it, which
Sure.
it's distinctive, right?
Yeah.
And as it should be. I mean, everybody's unique and everybody's distinct in their own way, and allowing that distinctiveness and the power to move out and be visible is part of being wild, right?
Well, yeah, and I think it's what we're dealing with is an expression of wildness, right? So some people express it in their art, in their writing, in their teaching. You know, why not be a wild? You know, students would love a wild teacher, as long as it was in the proper context. You know, I think what impresses versus what scares. The same thing with the lion example. So with that, again, Natalie, we've got Ashif here. Ashif is just wonderful. Got an unbelievable background, highly talented individual. Had a great talk with. Good day, I'm present, and Ashif comes up with some of the best quotes. So, Rita, we're off to a pretty strong start here.
Well, I remember when I was a principal, I would have parents come in and they'd say, "My child will never do that." Well, you know, I saw your kid do it, and they're like, "Oh, you might have gone wild for a minute, but that's not my child." I go, "Okay." So we use also the context about those kids. They're just really behaving wildly. It is not an acceptable thing. So when we're looking at wild, if we put it in the middle of a web or a Venn diagram, we're shooting out. There's lots of synonyms. There's lots of meanings for that word wild. But first I wanted to mention that fact. And Catherine, did you ever know anybody in your family or any kids or any people around you where you could say, actually, man, they just really gone wild now. I don't know what to do with them.
I think they were describing me.
I thought it was describing me.
Not me.
Not that guy in the middle, the sandwich guy.
The salami.
You were never wild, right, Don? Never.
Well, you know, I think there's a difference between wild in thought and wild in activity. People are always wild in their thoughts. They always are trying to extend the boundaries, look over the edge, you know, and I think that's the best wild because it's the only wild you can be assured of maintaining. Right? You can only dress wild for so long, and then it's just not dressing well, you know, so wild goes to not well. But in your mind, I mean, that's why they say age is a matter of how you think, right? You think either old or you think new, and it's not chronologically. It's in when are you dusting out the closet? You know, when are you keeping it organized and tight and clean? And, you know, how do you go to work every day? So I think that's the wildness. And sometimes you got to turn that wild dial up to get things moving, right? Sometimes you're in a group or a party. It's like everybody's weak. and, you know, you can't have that. You know, it takes a loud person to come in the room and start joking around and slapping everybody on the back before everybody starts loosening up. So I think to get to wild, there's a middle ground between normal and maybe excitement, you know, or you're working with a lot of energy and now you know where to place it. And then you're flying a wild direction.
Right.
I mean, when you walk down a park and someone just singing out loud, to some people, they think that's wild. But to me, it's a compliment to where they are in their mind. So, Catherine, what do you think about this new direction with using a word and taking it into all kinds of places?
Well, I love it because, as you know, nothing happens without your imagination.
Yes.
And so it makes a huge difference. And I think that it's important to not only expand your vocabulary, but to really explore it, right?
Mhm.
Because I think it makes a huge difference because everything has an energetic value to it. And
Mhm. Yeah.
everything you think, everything, you feel, all of your actions, everything has an energetic value to it. And so if you're operating at a lower energy,
Right.
not much fun, and it doesn't get you very far. And so it's important to expand and what can I use from this and what can I use from that? And oh my gosh, what idea does that spark? Right?
Right.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it is you got to entertain yourself before you can entertain others. You got to find something funny before you can share it or feel comfortable sharing it.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes you look at wild as the wild card, right? You
Mhm.
treat that as like the missing piece. It's, is I'm just looking, and that's maybe what gets you wild is somebody who invites you into their wildness, right? They're already there. They're just saying, hey, you want to hang out in this zone for a while. And, if you look at maybe all your past memories, the wildest were most fun and memorable looking back. It may not have been comfortable and it may not have been understandable at the time. But you got to give yourself credit for the courage you've always taken when you decided, I don't care, I'm going to get wild. And I think wild is uncontrollable by others. That's what makes you a threat sometimes if you're wild. It's not they care about you as much as they care about their own protection. But if you're wild in a fun way, right? Go to certain comedy movies. I mean, and see how they acted so wild that made you laugh, but it was okay because you knew it was a film.
Mhm.
So Rita,
Well, I'm wondering if we actually have a baseline that you're pointing to, Dawn and Catherine. Will get your thought on this in a minute. Where I happen to live now in Eugene, Oregon, since my big move from California. It's always wild here, except during lockdown. Eugene is known to be pretty wild. And so I couldn't accept a baseline of anything about people's clothing or hair or how they choose to carry and wear themselves. Because in Eugene, I've seen a woman walking down the street with a box on her head. I've seen just about everything. And that's normal where I am. That's not wild. Wild would be if they didn't have a man bun or long hair and still never got out of being a hippie. So if we're living in a place with Ken Kesey still electric Kool-Aid acid test, it's not all of where I live, but there's certainly a very large fraction or faction of people. And I think they're just wonderful because I know I'm crazier than anything and always have been. But it was my wildness that's always drawn people to me in that I can tamp it down when I need to. I can be serious at that table. But my natural inclination is definitely I walk on the wild side.
well, you rather use it instead of lose it, and I'd rather wear out than time out.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and when I look at wild, to what you just said, Rita, what used to be wild is now
yeah,
tame. When I look
yeah,
back at Elvis on Ed Sullivan, which really
right.
dates me, uh, that's so tame compared to what it is. So wild changes with
Mhm.
accepted. Once it's accepted, it's not as wild as when it's on the fringe.
No, I look normal now. I've waited long enough. Catherine, what do you think?
Hmm.
Well, I think it's really fun because I think that self-expression is so
Mhm.
important
Yes,
to be able to feel good about that.
right.
And I've been living in New York City for the last 10 or 12 years, and
Okay.
and so and I spend time in Philadelphia. My daughter and her family are in Philly, and it's as you say, you see everything. And what I really love about it is,
Mhm.
particularly in these environments, there's such a beautiful acceptance of
Yes,
self-expression, which I
yes.
think is really important. because, and I think that that's why, people are dressing and decorating themselves.
Mhm.
They are, because it is a beautiful way of self-expression and to be different, to express uniqueness. And it's not only in our actions and our thoughts, it's, as you say, Don, it's how we present ourselves too.
Yes. Well, your authentic self is what we're really looking for, and that's the point. I wouldn't want to see somebody, one day just goes off and does something what I would call wild for that person. But if it was on a regular basis, then it would cease being wild. So I'm wondering if we need to draw a line before we go over a cliff. Well, being wild was good to an extent. That zip lining maybe didn't do me any favors. That was a pretty wild thing for me to do. So whenever we go out of what our usual box is, I think we do tend to hear from friends or family or ourselves, that was a really wild thing. Maybe don't do that one again. So there might be go too far.
Well, and I think when we're talking about wild, one of the elements is do you come back from it?
That's right.
You're wild for 5 minutes, or you're just in a wild state for a relatively long time. So even wild has to have balance.
Well, can wild be coexisting then? Would you say with what's a good word for that? No, go ahead. No, I'll think something.
Well, here's the thing too about wild is how do you distinguish it yourself?
Right.
And to you, it could be totally comfortable and normal.
That's where I was going.
Somebody else, it could be wild, so you're
Right.
not living in the same wild consciousness as someone else.
But if we're being authentic and our natural self is on the wilder side compared to those that we hang with, there's a nice.
I guess it depends on your outside persona, because
Right.
if you're mild, meek, and modest, being wild could be ordering a cheeseburger today.
That's right.
That could be like something that could shake someone up, and other people can jump a cliff
Right.
and feel like they're going to grow wings before they hit the ground. So I think it's a matter of, just like exercise, it's a muscle, your wild side. The more you use it, the stronger it gets, but the more comfortable you are is moving into this unexplored territory.
And I also think that it's important to realize that everything is always in motion, right? And the pendulum is always swinging.
Always, right.
Right. And so the balance scale is always in motion. The pendulum is always in motion. And so what feels actually wild to us on one day may be pretty mild the next, right?
You're saying.
Yeah.
What I was thinking before, Don, was that when we actually get to the flow state, get in the zone, the flow state, is that discordant or can it be congruent? Can it be right there with wild? Could you be, and my point is, could you be in flow and be in that elevated state where we lose track of time and where we are, the whole thing? But do they go together? Can wild ever be there and be in the flow state? Or would wild possibly, Catherine?
I think so, because I think wild is powerful.
I do too.
And when you're in that flow state, you're powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're focused and you're moving forward. And so you don't even actually realize, I think, that you're being perceived possibly by others as being wild. But when you're in that flow state and in that high energy level, it is powerful, it is wild, and it's actually attractive.
Oh, it's so attractive, because I was just thinking, Catherine and Rita, that if someone comes up to you that you know and really are attracted to, and somebody says, "Would you like to see my wild side?" It would be like, for sure, let's see it right now if we can. Let's introduce.
Bring it out. Bring it out.
The key is trust is so important to be wild with someone.
Yeah.
Right? If you trust them, if there's love involved, it's like nothing could be too wild. Right? Because everybody's has a passport now. And I think at the end of the day, every word deserves intention and context. right? So if you're going to get wild, why? Well, I'm going to have a good time. Well, that's a great reason. You know, I'm going to make people laugh. I'm going to make people, or not make people, but allow people to see parts of me that they haven't had the chance to see. So a lot of people look at wild like imposing, intrusive, like loud, like too much, versus whimsical, you know, versus joyful. Because again, with the context, is this with this? Yeah, let's go. You know, but if we're going to get wild and go 140 miles down an hour down the highway, I can't. I'm not into that. You know,
There's a certain element of reckless with that, right?
absolutely. But let's take a moment for the audience, because we get so many comments. I feel remiss when I don't mention them. Natalie comes back with, I must admit that some of my ideas are wild. Once I begin to paint, often I hold back from what I originally imagined. Well, wild leads to a new wild, maybe, and not extending the same old wild. Good day from Shanir. Thank you. Ashif says it's good to go wild for a little while. Well put. Natalie comes back with, in order to be irreplaceable, one must also be different. Coco Chanel. Not using the word wild, this quote captures Chanel's belief in the importance of embracing one's uniqueness and individuality. So well put. Raquel's here. Raquel is family. She's just a wonderful lady who does so much for so many. So I can't thank you enough for coming today. Rohit, I hope I said it right. Wild means choosing an unconventional path and still remain cool about it. Wild is the new normal.
That's what I was saying.
Natalie, hello. I'll try to get a meteor one. Catherine, lovely to see you. Raquel, so you must know each other.
Always, Rocky.
Well, that's great. You know, it's one big community. I'm always believing in bigger doors, more bridges, because everybody's somebody, and everybody get to know everything they can that's available, and hopefully we can bring that to the surface. Omar's here. Watched your show, Omar, with Matt the other day. Very interesting. Ashif says wild, bold is beautiful. Natalie comes back with, I've lived in Connecticut for 20 years and my paintings are less wild than when I lived in California. Well, that's interesting. It's where you are, who you're with, what you're doing. Wild, bold is beautiful. Love that. Shanir says, having the capacity to be resourceful and creative. This is wild from a positive angle. Back with openness and acceptance.
Right.
You know, we're building so much around this foundation of wild. Be adventurous and exploratory. To show you stand out, you must be yourself. And Beverly's here, who just knocked it out of the park yesterday. Waves to all. Beverly will be coming back. And with that, catch up. This has been a new format than the last one you were on, Catherine. So what do you think about the community and how we come together around the word?
Oh, I like it because it is, you know, I use word banks, you know, with people that I work with sometimes, and as suggestions, right? Because I think sometimes people get stuck in the vocabulary that they use, you know, day after day after day after day. And then the conversations begin to sound pretty much all the same. And that's no fun, right? So I think this is great because I think, and in relation to wild, I think that it's a higher energy, the way my perspective looks at it. And that opens up more imagination, which opens up more possibilities, and then, you know, more avenues to get wild in, right? And so how fun is that?
Well, the word wild certainly has different connotations, and to everybody, it may have a different meaning.
Of course.
I've always had a pretty wild life, and we went to some wild places. Before eco trips were eco trips, I was out there and we were in the wild, and it was wild. But today, I think that there's a very fine line between, we talk about that authentic self, and that what we're looking at wild may just be who we are every single day. And I think that's where I am. I look at everything a little differently from my perspective, and it half the time is really wild. I'm really out there. The other part of the time, I have to bring in my analytic self and evaluate my behavior. Did I go over the line? And again, it is about the people that we're with too. If the norm where we are is to do kooky things and surprises and a lot of humor and laughing and all that, that might look wild to others who are in a very tame, sedate setting. And that's okay. Also, the differences between being introverted and extroverted, I think, are less than what people think. And my question to you then, Catherine, is what would it look like if a more introverted or more quiet, private person went wild? Would that be way different than somebody who's already on a nut side, kind of wild? Which is me, Debbie. I'll take credit for that. Donald's laughing. Yes, I am.
I think that people
I
take
tell my truth.
Yeah, I think that people take notice of that much more quickly, right?
Yes.
And notice the change of the temperature, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can absolutely be a beautiful choice for people to do that, particularly if they're looking to promote something or themselves, right? To make a change, because you have to. I'm starting a campaign, and I've used this phrase "give a ripple" in my email for years, right? And I think that's what we're talking about: give a ripple. And I think that it is so important to, as you say, evaluate and make the choice of what you're putting out, because we have a choice as how we do it.
I'm sorry, Don, what do you think about that?
Well,
that was great, Catherine. I love that.
I'm thinking a lot about it, and that's the beauty of the show. It really is thought-provoking for all of us because we're in the moment, spontaneously responding to what someone just said who created a thought, or someone just commented who created a direction. But again, with direction, you have to say everything we've talked about so far on the show has been projection. How do you view wild? How do you get wild? But if you look at it like reception now, and how do you deal with this wild world? When you see a person going wild and you ask the person next to you, what do you think? They may say that person's going wild, or they may think that person's a fool. On the receiving side, it gets blasted and resonates in different ways to different people, depending on where you are, even in your day. Right? If you're just waking up, wild's not the first thing on your right? You're just looking to get yourself together and get the day rolling. But if it's 9 o'clock at night in Vegas or something, then it's almost like, hey, how do you want to get wild? It's not
place matters, and that was another point that we hadn't talked as much about yet. But place really matters. There is a time and a place for everything. And if we're in a sedate atmosphere, or you happen to be in a church or a synagogue or a private screening or private classical music concert, you don't want to be wild there. So I think place has a lot to do with it. If we're not acting what is appropriate for that time and place, then we better dial it back in really fast, reel it back in, or we won't be projecting ourselves who we really, really are. They're only seeing one piece of that pie.
Yeah, makes sense. I look at that like wild is a matter of frequency or amplification too. So if you were in church and somebody in the choir just went totally wild with their song, right? That would get everybody on their feet. So it's a matter of respectfully wild. Is this respecting the people here? Is this something that's going to support the people here? And that's why a lot of shows, you got an opening act just to get people moving, just to get people in the audience up on their feet. So when the main act shows up, they've already got a momentum going for them. And I like Catherine's point about the ripple.
Yes.
Your wildness could spark somebody else's wildness in what they were hoping to do, right? It's like, I don't want to be wild like that person. I want to be wild like me.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is with wild, there's steps to it and from it. So you can start putting your toe in the water and start getting a little wild and engaging the response.
Right.
And then based on someone says, hey, that's really cool. Just love what you're doing. Then you're going to put your foot in the water. And if you get enough people promoting you and supporting you, you'll do anything in front of them. And I think that's the audience allows the wildness to come out in people based on acceptance or based on connection. But it shouldn't steal your uniqueness or authenticity. It just says it's not my stage. It's not my theater, but before we swing it back, let's get back to comments because they're coming in pretty fast and furious. Here we go with Linda. Linda's a regular. Remember hearing, oh my, that band Kiss is wild, yet they're
Right.
people and touch lives. Well, what was yesterday's wild is today's norm. Catherine, I like how in your post you invite us to send you a fun message. That's so nice, because again, that's a little bit wilder than
That's
most.
great. I love that, Catherine.
Unique and differentiating and distinctiveness is something that can help wild get further. Good morning. Beverly is here. Beverly Glazer, there's agreed reader, you're wild and my wild can be two different things. Chief says, let the music play. Beverly comes back to my wild days are long over, serenity now. There's a lot of times I do it vicariously through others. I can get wild watching my grandkids get wild. I'm living with them and in them at the time. So Christine, haven't seen you in a while. Christine, just a wonderful lady. So happy I could finally make it today. Nice to see mature women having a voice on your show. Well, it's nice to see everybody having a voice, and being wild gives you that voice. And it just says you want to tune it up right now. You want to do something you haven't done in a while and impress yourself and surprise yourself. You can leave the wild, but the wild never leaves you. So true. And I hope everybody starts to tie in with their wilder side and ask themselves, why are they not bringing it out of the closet once in a while? Why aren't they creating opportunities or looking for opportunities where they know that's a welcome compliment and addition? So with that,
Right.
what's your new thoughts?
Pass. Catherine.
As
I reserve the right to pass.
Yeah. As we've been talking about all of this, it also occurs to me that, I've worked in healthcare for a very long time as well. And that's a wild environment for many people that they don't know too much about.
Right.
And so I always feel that it's important to have that understanding and be able to educate people, I guess would be a proper word, educate people about the wildness of it, so it's not so wild in their perception, right?
Yes.
And I think that makes a difference. And this may sound kind of odd, but I started working ICU right out of college, and I just learned right away that nobody likes to be treated like they're dead until they are. And people appreciate a sense of humor, and they appreciate being educated, and they appreciate being invited
Yes.
to come into that environment that seems very wild to them at the time. And so, it happens in many arenas. And so I think that it's important to, have that empathy piece and look at it from other people's point of view sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Rita?
Well, I'm wondering what you two think, and everybody, all of our friends here today, if we are in an environment that is a little more staid, it's more sedate, it's very calm, and it's very settled. And then how do we feel when somebody comes in and they're really wild and they're raucous? Is there such a thing anymore?
Is someone being too wild?
Yeah.
I guess
What would that look like? What might that sound like?
again, it's the audience, it's the reaction from anybody,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So if you have a gathering and let's say you have 5 good friends, you're protective of their time and their space. And if someone comes in and starts affecting anybody or all of them, then that's just not acceptable. And that wildness has to be put out like a forest fire. You just have to pour water on it, and that's the end of it. But it really then isn't wild. It has now transformed itself into disruptive, right?
Mhm.
Wild is when someone dances in their space, not throwing stuff and breaking stuff, and nobody wants that kind of wild. And if you can get wild, it shows you're capable of being wild,
Mhm.
right? And that's important. You got to test the tank to see if you got any gas in there. And you can I think you can change wild with your wildness, because to me, just a real, it's gratitude. Just a wonderful bowl of oatmeal with bananas today, and some pineapple, and then cinnamon. I mean, it was a wild oatmeal because I took the time to add a little bit, and then took a picture in my mind of it.
Mhm.
I think if people would just slow down and see how wild they can be in private, in thought,
Mhm.
in vision.
Mhm.
Too many people, it's so easy to jump up and down and scream, but that's lends itself to a high degree of energy,
Mhm.
at a certain point, your wildness is in happiness,
Yeah.
right? How wild can I be in my happiness? How much can I appreciate every day
Yeah.
in every way? Instead of like, I got that covered, let's get some more. It's like we're never done getting more until you find out you're getting less of yourself, because the more stuff you got, the more stuff got you.
Mhm.
And I think that's where people have to get wild, is breaking out of what's conventional.
Yes.
When they're successful in what everybody else thinks, how wild is that?
Well, if you're a maverick, a trailblazer, then I think sometimes or very often that we are perceived as being pretty wild for that organizational culture.
Mhm.
So, knowing that every organization has its own culture, it has to be what's appropriate for that culture. And generally speaking, if you have one or two people that act in a really elevated, escalated, wild manner, that's probably really great for the team. But if they did it all the time and they're annoying people on the team, then that's not working.
Well, and I think it's constantly being adjusted by everybody around you,
That's right.
because
You have to
sometimes
read the room.
you might think yourself, and you go up to some guy, go a little bit too far with that.
Right.
Did I go beyond? And that's okay, because how do you learn and how do you get feedback unless you're the first one to go first? Now, let's get back to some comments. Natalie says, I like what you said about being wild like me, Donald. Being wild like me encompasses the freedom to be genuine, to live life on your own terms, and to honor the essence of who
Yeah.
you are. And to Rita's point, I think it brings up, if you're in a company or a culture
Hmm.
that doesn't respect the true you, doesn't allow you to express your true self,
Mhm.
then you have an issue with congruence.
That's right.
It's not about word at this point. Excuse me. Ashif says there is serenity and solitude in the wild.
I was about to go there. I want to stop because he jumped well. What I was just thinking about is the converse, that when I need quiet, I need to go into the wild. And that was where I really wanted to go now, was to tamp it down. If I need to tamp it down, I need to leave. I need to go to the Oregon coast. It's not that far for us. And when I go to the coast, it's a wild environment. Some areas of the Oregon coast have agates, some have dunes, but we all have beautiful cold water that you're cold if you swim in. But when I get into the wild, then I completely decompress and I'm just one with nature. I'm in that, as Catherine say, that rhythm. more the vibration of being there in the quiet. And then I just stop. Complete silence, solitude, just the opposite of the way I am 99% of the time. But I need that. I need those breaks.
Yeah.
Catherine?
Well, I think that soaking it in, right,
Yes.
is really, because we are that part of nature, and
Yes.
we're just all part of the mix.
Right.
And I think it's important to embrace that.
Mhm.
And what's fascinating, I think, about the activity, the action of being wild, it's like any action, we need to be recharged, right?
Yes.
We need to bring in that energy and
Yes.
absorb it and be able to then use it, right? And it's a give and take constantly, like breathing, right? And so it's important to say yes.
Well, on that point, which I think is terrific, a lot of people depend on your wildness because a lot of times people have little tricks or talents. And somebody say, well, do that, right? Do that joke or do that impression. Or if you're a bowler and you know bowling tricks and you're kind of showing off on how you can throw the ball between your legs,
Right.
all these different things. What is like easy for you creates wildness for others, and a lot of it is signaling that you're open to it because people who wear extravagant things invite all kinds of feedback. And it doesn't have to be wild, it could be just totally beautiful, right? That someone just really went over the top in how they designed their look today or their speech today. And, when you can look at wild as the result now and say, because of that speech, my imagination's going wild. You ignited
Yeah.
something. You opened the jar top, and now all of a sudden this wildness came back into my thought or my life. It could be an activity, it could be a person. It's so easy to go from black and white to color TV and back to black and white sometimes. And I think that's something that experience teaches you is, hey, this could be a wild ride. Everything in life is kind of catch and release. You attain it, you throw it back for the next person, you go for your next one. Versus hang on, hold on, lock it up, let no one see it. It's like time is ticking away while you're defending yourself about fear that doesn't exist, people that don't really care as much as you think. And that's another part of wild. You think, what's everybody going to think? Not much. If they haven't thought much about you up until now, you being wild isn't going to make them feel less about you. They might think, hey, I never knew you were that kind of person. I love that. And sometimes until you express it, you don't know. And it's like knocking on doors. Some open, and the ones who don't lead you to the ones that do. But you don't sit there trying to force your way in or pick the lock. And that's what a lot of people who aren't authentic and are doing wild for the wrong reasons, right? It's a distraction. It's a shining object that they, and so everything is a two-edged sword. And it really comes down to trust, as we talked about, because if you can trust somebody completely, you don't question them about what if, what happens. If they're taking you for a ride, they're not going to let you drown. I mean, they wouldn't do that to someone if they were that person. So, Rita, it seems like no matter what word we start with, I was actually thinking I won't do it, but what if the word was chicken bone? I don't know where we go with something like that,
We'll
but
find it.
yeah, I'm sure.
If we could do undeniable, we could do chicken bone, but there'd be two words, and we're on W's. If we've got Wisdom Wednesday, Whimsical Wednesday, Winning Wednesday, Wild Wednesday, I've been waiting for this one. I asked Don, Catherine, if we could do like wacky, weird. He came up with wild, and that was just as good for me. I mean, little variation on a theme. Now, I'm thinking also as a parent and a nana. Another question here. Some parents might say, oh my gosh, those kids are acting wild, or my kids are really acting wild. And then the other parent has the kids doing the very same thing, and they go, isn't that wonderful? They're just really playing so beautifully, and they're discovering, and they're, and doing their thing, so to speak. So our perceptions, whether it is as a parent or a partner, or as a friend or a colleague, our perception might be different than the other person looking at that same event at the same time. So I'm wondering if sometimes maybe we're a little bit off there. And like the word wild, now we've gone through other words like it's lit, it's fly. There's one expression after another for the word that we say is wild. Maybe it's going to go away because it is the norm now, hypothetically.
Well, I think there are as many different perceptions on the planet as there are people.
Right.
We're all looking at through our own lens.
Yes, yeah.
And absolutely. But, I think that there really is a theme that goes from generation to generation, because how many times have you heard the phrase,
right,
your wildest dreams?
Yes.
Right?
That's a good one.
Yeah, well, and as we talk about wild, we also really talk about adventure, which has come up in this conversation, going off into the jungle, into the woods, with lions, and what gives you a little bit more motivation to do what you know you should do, no matter how it looks to others, right? So in other words, it may be wild, but it's something I just got to do, or hey, I got to get to somewhere. If I get a ticket, I'll be looked at as being wild, and that comes back to intention. It's like what you wear every day. Where are you going? What do you want to be seen at or not be seen as? With wild, I think it's also kind of a testing opportunity. Is you can get to know someone by dialing up something that's a little bit different, and then you can get your feedback from that little difference you put out there to say if it needs a little bit more. It's kind of like cooking, and I kind of look at this show as cooking. If everybody gave everybody a lamb shank at the beginning of the show, says at the end, make a meal out of this thing, you might find the lamb shank to be indistinguishable from all the things that you combined with it. But what it does is it really tests the people on the panel and the audience to be, how resourceful are you in coming back with something that is more aligned, more relevant. And then not only that, goes beyond to the point of stimulating the audience's thought. So if 40 or 50 people can come together for an hour and everybody's thinking about what they're saying, about what they're hearing, about what it's meaning, there's too much noise out there. There's too much distraction. When you can get clarity, why people go to places on their own or places that are different than where they're at is for their mind to come in a solid, comfortable place, versus catching something here and adding it to it there, and then kind of patching things together. And that's wild. When you get achievement that comes easier than ever, right? That you get friendships that are stronger than ever, earlier than ever,
right?
And now you're saying, hey, wild's a good approach, because it sorts faster, and I think that's important. Catherine?
Well, what's really fun about that is what I'm getting from what you're saying is that from that perspective, wildness has a real coherence to it. And that's useful. Extremely useful.
Well, that's a perfect way of looking at it, because when you look at that, it's a lot to do with measurement, right? It's a lot to do with how much do we need. And you know what it is it's a tool in your tool chest, right? And you always say, this is an opportunity to bring out a little wildness. It's like you might say, time for a joke, and then everybody will then focus on the joke, and maybe that will be the pivot that you need the audience's energy to move to and from. And you then have control over wild. So wildness to some people is out of control. Other people is an expanded color of it. Now this is flaming hot what we're doing.
Well,
That could be one. Go ahead, Catherine.
don't you think there's a difference between being wild and being disheveled? Right?
Right?
Well, absolutely, because again, it's definition, and some people would rather it be portrayed and interpreted that way, right? If you run outside to get your mail in your house coat, you're going to feel like, hey, how do I approach somebody who sees me or walks by me? But you're taking that chance and you don't care. I think that's the best part of being wild. You're just like, hey, I've been waiting too long. This is my chance. I'm going to do it, and let the chips fall where they may. And you know what will happen? How you react when you're done doing it will be how people react to you.
That's right.
If you're sheepish and you feel embarrassed or ashamed, they're going to add to that. But if you say, hey, it's a beautiful day, and you dance back to your front door, so and plus just by that example, there's a million examples, right? Like going to the grocery store, you see people and it's like, that's wild. They've been sitting there touching these cantaloupes for 30 minutes and they can't find one. And you're just fascinated, and you wonder. So Rita, what's your thoughts? There's a lot of laughter taking place now.
Oh, I'm just laughing at all of it. I'm having a great time with Catherine being here. I love what you're saying, Catherine. Don, we talk all the time, a little different. I'm thinking that recently I saw several movies during lockdown and whatnot. You didn't go anywhere, but I'm getting out a little bit more now. So I saw the movie that won all the Academy Awards and everything, whatever. I don't even remember. But I remember when I got home, and then all my friends and family said, well, what did you think about it? I said, it was wild. I don't know what it was about. It was so wild. It was out there. It was colorful, and Jamie Lee Curtis was really great, or whatever, and Michelle Yeoh. But that was a wild movie. So I don't use it like a negative thing there. I'm just saying it was out there. So it was wild, even for me. If I can't figure out what something's about, then it might be wild in a good way, but it's different. So I go, that was a wild movie.
Well, you make an excellent point because, again, how much tolerance do you have for wild? Just like hot sauce, right? How spicy does it have to be before it's not enjoyable? How wild does it have to be, when it's like, hey, this was fun and now this is moving into that. But also, it's like Romancing the Stone or
Right.
that movie. When you're done with an adventure that scares the hell out of you, and it's over and you're okay, then that's something you celebrate, right?
It was wild.
I would never ever do that again, but boy, I'm sure happy I did, and you put that as something of pride, that you never thought you could do something and you did it.
Well, that's where your body language comes in too. And our tone, if we're going, it was wild. But what if I came and said, oh, God, that was so
well, even if you see kids taking these dangerous rides in these amusement parks, as soon as they get off, they're scared out of their mind and they can't wait to get back on to do it again. Because they don't have to deal with a lot of the contextual things with the everyday. They're just into thrills. They're just into scare me as much as you can. And I can take it, and some of these movies that they go to, I wonder, how do you sleep at night? But again, it lends itself to being open-minded to other people's wildness. And like anything else, if it doesn't hurt anybody else, and the intent was for good, then you don't know what it is until you do it. And pretty soon, things create a momentum either backwards or forwards for you. So when you deal with something that you can't overcome, it starts overcoming you and backing you up. And when you go forward, knowing that you're in control of every moment and you can always walk backwards. You know, it's not like full speed ahead. It's like, hey, as long as the water's fine, I'm here. And when it gets bad, maybe I'm not. But I think it also gives you time and gives other people time. Because sometimes you say it's wild and it's only halfway through the performance, right? And then it comes back around and it modifies itself. And you say, well, it's a good thing I bought some more vowels before I tried to solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
And life is a mystery. Life is a puzzle. And being wild is really, if you look to me, a painter with a bold brush that's just slapping paint as fast as they can is wild painting versus that person who's pinpointing and making sure every little dot is in the right place. Uh, but let's cover some more people before it's almost top of the hour. Like I say, this is one of the fastest hours on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Nicole. Nicole's coming with Leslie Flowers this week. Should be an interesting team. I can tell you teachers could say because of conditions, some days have been more wild moments, and even more so with what diet does to people. Jeff comes back with sometimes being wild can help you recharge oneself.
Yes.
You know, Natalie, so well said. Ashif is, I am an old and wild soul. I will always be. Christine comes back with trailblazing. Okay, well, it should be in comments. Feel free to check it out. Natalie's getting a hello from Nicole. Janice is here. Is that the venerable Catherine Chadwick?
Janice.
Well, how do you know Janice now that Janice is here?
Oh, because we're in another group, the Hounds. Right?
Okay.
That's how I met Janice.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, well, you know, the thing is it's starting to blend and being, you know, an easy transition to this show, to that show, because everybody is trying to learn, trying to build together. And, you know, that's so important to building bigger communities.
I saw that, Janice.
Oregon Coast is the best. I'm 90 minutes away. I love it too.
I saw that, Janice. Hello.
Yeah, you should meet Janice. She's
I'll catch up with Janice.
And I hope people use this opportunity to see who's here, get to know them, get to connect with them, and if they're aligned and there's mutual interest, have a conversation. You know, I mean, you can only learn. Christine Ambambola is here. Ambambola is just wonderful. Good morning. Thank you for being here, Janice. Love to have you on the show. I know almost every hound is welcome to this show and welcome to appear. Wild activities are often synonymous with age, and I love that you are reframing wild. And I remember Girls Gone Wild.
I didn't want to bring that up because when I first lost my husband, some of my friends said, well, it's going to be Widow Gone Wild. And I go, what? I think that's what they're thinking about, though. But I do remember that Girls Gone Wild. So it's been around in different connotations.
Oh, you know, everything is context and reference. And sometimes words shouldn't be used the way they're used. It's okay to say yes and it's okay to say no. So true. Beverly says right now, when someone loosens up, it can be welcoming to others to let go too.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to be the model. You got to be the proactive initiator. Susanna's here. So great to see you, Susanna. Wonderful connection, and somebody on LinkedIn you really should know. And she puts out some great content. Happy Wednesday morning. So glad you're here. Ashif, feel life, it's wild. Let me see. If you're going to rise, you might as well shine. So true. Kelly's here. Kelly's the greatest. It is wild that I wasn't able to comment. I don't know. It's always something. You know, if it's not this, it's that. Love that, Ashif. Here's is this new person? Okay, someone's promoting another link, but that's good. I dressed wild in the 80s, and now my daughter dresses wild and has style. So, you know, what does that say to, you know, what's old is new again?
Yeah.
Catherine, kind of wrapping up. It went pretty fast. I think
Wow.
you're fabulous. What's your final thoughts for the audience and the show?
Well, it's been a real pleasure to be here with you and everybody. And oh my goodness. And my thought right now is let's all be wild today.
Well, that's wonderful. And I think you mean it. And I'm so glad to put that message out there for everyone. Rita?
Nothing. I've just had the best time, and I'm really interested in reading more of the comments from our community of belonging. But I think that wild is just, even when you say it, it's just wild. But the last thing I was thinking about was when you go outside and you go on any nature trail, depending whether we're in a city and we go to a park or where we go out there, some of the most beautiful things out there are those wild flowers that just stand out. All of a sudden you see this bloom and you look at it and you go, oh man, it's just out here wild. It's not constrained. It's just growing like crazy, and beauty is all around us. That would be my final note, that if it takes me to change my state into, if I'm not engaged or in the zone, at least to recognize the brilliance and the beauty of our wonderful world, that's just wild, and why not?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think to kind of distill what we've said, wild is more of a seasoning than the main dish.
Yes.
You can add a little bit of wild to something to make it a little bit more pep in your step. Add a little fashion accessory that by itself will create a little bit more flair, or on the way to wildness. And then tune it up just like any seasoning, depending on circumstances, or more importantly, opportunities. You can seek opportunities where wildness is not only acceptable but encouraged. And it's so much easier to be in those situations. And you only have so much time. You are where you are. The question is, who do you want to be with? Where do you want to go with them? And then how wild of a ride can you look at your life when it's over and say, boy, I sure had a thrill ride here. This was just a roller coaster that just filled me with joy and happiness. That's another seasoning. So why not eat savoring every meal, every day of your life by being a little wild? And people applaud you for stepping out of yourself once in a while, or doing something they know is not normal for you. Like someone will sing a song in a tradition or something, it's their song, or recite a poem. And people will depend on that for a source of inspiration.
Right.
And they would say, well, if Uncle Sam would have done that, I'll do it. And so with that, I know I try to respect top of hour. Thank you all for coming. Come back tomorrow. I'll tell you who's here tomorrow. We've got Kelly. Danny is here. Hasn't been here before. Danny is a great guy. This Friday, we got Christy and Natalie. And then on Saturday, we got Leslie Flowers and Nicole. And then Sunday, we've got Sarah Dawkins. And then Monday is Gretchen. So great lineup. I can't thank everybody enough. You made my day start off with a start. So enjoy. We'll talk in 23 hours. Bye for now.